Hi, welcome to part 2 of the video series about laws of motion. In the previous video, we learned about force, classification of force, and how to draw free body diagrams. In this video, we will start with the first law of motion, define inertia, and learn about the relation of inertia with the mass of an object. In some books, laws of motion are also known as Newton's laws of motion, as he was the person who have stated them. By doing so, sometimes we come to a wrong assumption that these laws have started with Newton. But we need to understand that Newton just was the person who observed and formulated or stated these laws. Actually, there were other scientists who have observed these laws before Newton, but Newton has polished these statements and stated them in the current forms which we learn today. After this long introduction, let's start with the first law of motion. First law of motion, or Newton's first law, states that a body will remain in its state of rest or motion at constant velocity unless a non-zero resultant or net force acts on it. There are some key phrases here. If you have noticed, in the definition, non-zero resultant or net force has been used instead of phrase non-zero force. This is because it is impossible to get an object without any force acting on it. Later in this topic, we will learn that every particle or body in the universe attracts every other particle or body, which means an object will always experience a gravitational force, even if its amount is negligible. Even though we can't get an object which does not experience a force, we can get an object where all forces applied on it are balancing each other. In other words, sum of all these forces is equal to zero. To summarize, we can't get an object with no force on it, but we can get an object with the net force on it is equal to zero. Second important point in this definition is that object will remain at rest or move with constant velocity. When net force on an object is equal to zero, sometimes we wrongly assume that this object is definitely at rest. Now imagine an object which is moving to the right. If there will be net force applied on the object to the right, the speed of the object will increase. In contrast, if there will be the net force applied on an object to the left, object will slow down. But if net force is equal to zero, there will be no reason for the object to change its speed, so it will move with constant speed or velocity. To summarize, we need to understand that if net force on an object is equal to zero, the object can be at rest or move with constant velocity. If we can put it in another way by reversing the statement, if an object is at rest, net force on it is equal to zero, and if an object is in motion with constant velocity, net force on it is equal to zero. Newton's first law, sometimes referred to as the law of inertia. Inertia is the property of an object that resists any change in the state of rest or uniform motion. Let's assume that we are standing in a bus which is initially at rest. What will happen if the bus suddenly starts to move? We may fall backwards if not holding on something, or if bus stops suddenly. This time we may fall forward. The reason in both cases is our inertia. In the first case, bus is at rest, so are we. Then bus starts to move, we want to keep our state of rest. That's why we fall backward. In the second case, now our body gets used to move with the constant speed as bus. Then bus suddenly slows down, but we want to keep our state of motion with constant velocity forward, and as a result we lean forward. That's why seatbelts are important. Seatbelts stop our motion and keep us in our seats. This protects us from our own inertia. They provide a safe, unbalanced force to stop our forward motion and protect us from injury. Different objects have different amount of inertia. So how can we measure the amount of inertia in an object? Inertia is determined by the object's mass. In a natural sciences class, we have learned that mass is the quantity of matter in a physical body. Another definition of mass is that it is measurement of inertia. The greater an object's mass, the greater its inertia. Let's assume we have a pair of bolt nuts. If a strong enough magnet is brought close to them, they will be attracted towards the magnet. If we bring the same magnet towards a horseshoe, even though there will be attraction force between these two, due to greater mass, it will be much difficult to change its state and move the horseshoe towards the magnet. In today's video, we have stated the first law of motion, defined inertia, and learned about the relation of inertia with the mass of an object. In the next part of this video series, we will learn what equilibrium is, and then we will solve 3 examples to explain the topic better. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications in order to be updated about my new videos.